Hello and welcome, I'm SimUK, and it is my goal to provide to you the most honest, fact-based critical reviews on YouTube. If you find this review helpful, then please hit that like button, subscribe, and help to support the channel by donating via the links below. Thank you so much, and enjoy the review. Hello and welcome, I am SimUK. Thrustmaster sent me a TCA Sidestick to review, and I will repay that kindness by isolating and highlighting not only all the positives that I have found, but also the negatives that I encountered whilst testing this device. Now, Thrustmaster did send me this Sidestick as an afterthought, so my review is coming out weeks after everyone else's, but I can confirm straight away that this review will have details in that nobody else has covered. Last thing to mention before we get into the review is that I reached out and asked you, my community, what questions you wanted answering. Some of you were kind enough to reply, so I will answer each and every one of those questions directly. Let's review. So Yanni and others wanted to know about the build quality, and if you haven't already watched my unboxing and first thoughts video, then I can confirm straight away that the build quality is of a very high standard. From the base and the buttons and all the way up the Sidestick to the triggers, it all feels solid and very responsive. I'll talk more about responsiveness in a bit. This is a plastic Sidestick, so you can expect some very small amount of flex in the plastic itself, but it really is minimal, and it offers an overall quality that is right up there with the very best controllers available. Now, it isn't in the same realm as the Warthog, which is mostly metal, but at $64.99 it is also considerably cheaper, so it is both robust and cost effective. Button placement and thumb reach. So this device is primarily built to accommodate somebody who wants full flight functionality within a single Sidestick device, also known as somebody who does not own a throttle quadrant. Now, all of the buttons are fairly easy to reach, but they do require either a quick hand swap or a reach around in order to access the buttons on the other side of the stick. This is a little cumbersome any way you look at it. If you're running this with a throttle quadrant, then you probably won't be looking at using any of the buttons at all, maybe at most 50% of the buttons on offer. But certainly if you're going to use this as a throttle quadrant and you're not intending on expanding upon that, then you are going to have to put up with this. The button placement and thumb reach is pretty good. The buttons on the top of the Sidestick are interchangeable and you can configure those any way you like. Now they, I would say, are brilliantly placed, absolutely perfect. Now whether it's an aesthetic look or a medical reasons for how you position those buttons, having that versatility really can benefit people here. Button contact quality. Now the buttons are perfectly adequate in terms of button contact quality, and although they do have a soft rubber bottom and that is noticeable, they are very responsive and they offer a pretty decent button press feedback. Now a few of you wanted to know about the precision of movement and the dead zone that exists in this system, and I'm glad to say that with my extensive testing, the dead zone is minute, and I mean almost none at all. There is obviously a centralization to the Sidestick, but there is no considerable dead zone that I need to mention at all. This is thanks to the Heart implementation, which is the Hall Effect Accurate technology, which is basically magnetic sensors with a 14-bit resolution. That's 16,384 by 16,384 available values, and that applies for both the pitch axis and the roll axis, but not the twist grip, not the rudder itself. I suspect that the dead zone that does exist is probably to do with the plastic flex, but there really is almost no dead zone to speak of. And the precision that this device provides is absolutely incredible. It is way better than any of the other devices that I currently own, and I've got about 7 different joystick combinations for flight simulation. It is so smooth and it is so accurate. I really love the feel that this Sidestick offers, and it translates into the sim perfectly. Long-term angle wrist tension. So I have spent a lot of time testing this device now. I have played X-Plane 11, Rise of Flight, FSX, and even Flight Sim World. Don't judge me. And it is very, very comfortable to use. But whilst playing Rise of Flight, I did encounter some wrist ache, and this was after quite a few hours, I have to say. Now, if you're not familiar with Rise of Flight, it's a World War I combat flight sim, and as such, most of the planes at least have no trim. So you are holding the stick constantly to maintain a straight and level flight. Interestingly enough, it is this exact reason that trim was introduced to aeroplanes, to stop that wrist fatigue. So it actually ticks a lot of realism boxes right there. Now in the modern sims, obviously this isn't such a big issue, and I didn't have any issues. I found it as comfortable to use as it is precise, and the handrest really does feel very comfy. So you wanted to know about the strength of the spring, especially in comparison to the T1600 and the Logitech Extreme 3D. Now I don't have a T1600 to compare this with, nor do I have a Logitech Extreme 3D, so I can't give you bona fide factual statements about how it feels in comparison to those. But what I can say is that the spring strength here is certainly not extreme. Any child of any age could easily move the side stick in any direction, and likely for quite an extensive period of time. It does offer about the right level of resistance to feel authentic to me, but I have never flown an Airbus, so I cannot really vouch for the comparable authenticity of that resistance. But for me, it feels just fine. I do a lot of GA flying, and for me, I find it to be perfectly pleasant, and it really does work exactly as I would hope that it would. Now originally I thought that the spring in this side stick was adjustable. I'm not sure where I thought I read that, but I certainly can't find anything to confirm that's the case. And having looked at this device in detail, I think I must have been mistaken, because it doesn't seem as though the spring is adjustable at all. So there is that possibility that the spring will degrade over time and become even less strong, but that is mere speculation, and to be honest, it could take 10 years before that even becomes any kind of problem. So, thank you for your questions. I hope I've answered them to the degree that you hoped I would. If you have any further questions on that, please don't hesitate to ask me. But from this point on, I want to share with you my findings regarding the functionality, the practicality, and the issues that I discovered with this device. And there are some that you will need to know about. So the TCA side stick is an ambidextrous design, which means you can quickly swap it from being a left-handed joystick to a right-handed joystick. And you do this by flicking the switch on the bottom of the device. What that does is reverse your controller's keybind, so any inputs that you have registered for the top left-hand button will be switched. So when you're in left-hand mode, it will then become the top right-hand button input. Now that's pretty cool, but in reality, the ambidextrous button switching is not really all that important, because the chances of you switching from a left hand to a right hand is not likely to happen all that often. But as this is an Airbus side stick, that actually does make more sense here than it usually would. As an A320 captain flies with their left hand, especially if you're trying to be authentic, but you might not want to fly as an A320 captain all of the time. Let's be honest, it's very unlikely that you're only ever going to fly the Airbus A320. So you might want a quick and easy way to switch buttons over so that you can fly other planes with your right hand. So for that, it is a decent addition to the side stick. However, the ergonomic interchangeable top button configurations make considerably more sense. And it is quick and easy to do by simply unscrewing, swapping, and retightening the new button combo. It is a bit of a shame that they're not magnetic, but as they are, they do work perfectly well. So referring back to button reach, the comfort level is noticeably changed depending on the configuration which you choose here. Now it isn't a massive stretch to reach even the wider red button combination with either hand, but there is a difference, and having that functionality gives you options, be that for aesthetic purposes or even for medical reasons. And that leads me rather nicely onto an issue. So the natural placement of the hand is across the button sets like so. But what you'll find pretty quickly is that you can pinch or crush your fingers, especially when performing extreme maneuvers, and the same can happen when your hand is on the throttle axis at the back. Now, I admit freely that extreme maneuvers in an A320 are unlikely, but equally as unlikely is that you will only ever want to fly an A320 whilst using this side stick. This side stick will almost certainly be used for other things and other games, like Elite Dangerous for example, or Rise of Flight. Each time I did this, I learnt to reposition my hand ever so slightly, and now it barely happens at all, but it's still worth mentioning. The biggest issue with this device is the built-in throttle axis and thrust reverser mechanism. Whilst its precision is undeniable, this is incredibly precise and incredibly smooth. But the way in which the throttle slider is designed means that the bottom 20% of it is behind a detent, with a button at the very, very bottom of the axis. But the detent is far too weak. It needs to be way more pronounced than it currently is. It is so easy, far too easy, to slip past it into the bottom 20% without even noticing. The button located at the very bottom of the axis can be bound for whatever you want, but it kind of makes sense to bind it as a reverser. But to make it work well, you'll have to be a little bit creative. I tested the axis bound in both directions, and they both have issues. It doesn't seem to be possible to bind the throttle axis to reach 0 when it hits the detent. If it did work, then that would allow you to bind the remaining 20% as the reverse thrusters, but that doesn't seem to be possible. On modern airliners with reversers, it certainly does make sense to incorporate this into the throttle axis itself. When set with maximum throttle at the top and minimum throttle at the bottom, what happens is you really can't easily set the throttle at 0%. It will slip too easily into the button activation at the bottom, which then activates the reversers. The best combination that I managed for modern sims was to have the button activate a switch for reversers. So it's bound so that maximum throttle is at the top and minimum throttle is at the bottom. When you hit the button activates the reversers, but they'll be set at 0. Then I have the full use of the axis for the reverse thrusters as well. Dropping them back to 0 and into the button deactivates the reverse thrusters and switches back to main engines, again at 0. Of all the methods that I tried, this was by far the best implementation, and I highly recommend that you consider doing it this way as well. Equally, when the axis is reversed, which is in keeping with World War I aviation because throttles worked the opposite way round than they do these days, you will find that you cut the engine out too easily by accident. So, overall, this is a very decent device. It has a few design issues and the detent is absolutely abysmal, but the precision of both the throttle axis and the side stick deliver the smoothest action that I have ever experienced in flight sims, and this is pre-configured to work with Microsoft Flight Simulator 20, which is of course a bit of a bonus. You certainly can use this single device to fly pretty much anything. No throttle quadrant is really required, and once you've configured it to your liking, you really can fly anything with relative ease. Plus the modular button combos available on the side stick itself provide that extra layer of customization. Now what I would have liked to have seen, along with the soon to be released throttle quadrant, is a dedicated device for that purpose, and perhaps at a lower price. When you're flying with a quadrant, you're less likely to need the throttle axis on the joystick, nor do we really need quite so many buttons, as, again, in order to use them you'll have to either take your hand off of the side stick or reach around with your throttle hand, neither of which is particularly ideal. That being said, you can never have too many buttons. This really is a solid device, and it's at a reasonable price. When combined with the thrusters, I think this will make a fantastic package, but even using it on its own as a side stick and throttle quadrant combined, this is a very, very, very precise, smooth and enjoyable side stick to use. It's easily my favourite side stick to fly with right now, and I can hardly wait to get my hands on that throttle quadrant. Thank you so much for watching. Please hit the like button, subscribe, consider donating just £1 to us a year so that we can continue making reviews like this for you. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Till next time. Goodbye.